And I quote, "I'll be there in a minute. Give me a second."
Time is relative, folks. Time is relative.
Yes. So, hey, cheers to everybody in the chat. They're a division rival. I don't care how many wins they get. Screw them.
That wasn't the take I was expecting to hear.
I want to gush over watching live Chris Tanev.
I think that we completely underestimate the skill it takes to play defense.
One highlight or several highlights does not a Calder trophy make.
I'm stepping in here. I'm going to be the crotchety old man here. They need to learn patience. They need to understand the tension, everything, and the drama.
How dare! Look at this. How is McDavid not getting a penalty?
You guys need to calm down with this, okay? You guys need to calm down.
Well, hello everyone. Certainly ever calm in Vancouver, of course. Welcome to the Shifts and Pucks podcast. You can follow us on Twitter at Shifts and Pucks, Facebook.com Shifts and Pucks, YouTube.com Shifts and Pucks, and of course, as well as part of the Hockey Podcast Network, as it is Sunday morning, NFC Championship morning. And here with Sean. Hello, Sean. How are you?
Hey, Kev. Yeah, excited for today with the Seahawks, and hopefully we can be celebrating a Seahawks win by the end of today.
I believe it's going to be tough, but I believe I do believe it'll, and it may be, if this happens, a rematch where the Broncos will want revenge for the 43-8 shellacking, or the rematch for one of the worst losses of my life, the infamous Russell Wilson and Malcolm Butler interception the year after. So it's a revenge. We'll get to that later. Let's get through the rounds, but it's revenge either way, or vengeance is the next level.
To be fair, like what's there is you bring those two seasons up, and specifically the Super Bowl winning season with that defense, and this defense has that feel in terms of their ability to just shut teams down. So I was quietly confident about last week. This week I'm not sure, just because of how the Rams have had, like, especially go back to that Thursday night game against the Rams, and how insane that game was. And it's going to come, like, I know this is a hockey podcast, but I want to get this off my chest. If Sam Darnold can manage the ball and not throw 4 interceptions, it's not going to be close. That, like, because you look at those two games that the Seahawks and Rams played, it was interception city for Sam Darnold. I think he had like 3 or 4 in both games, and the Seahawks won one and were in the other one right to the bitter end. So if they can, I think we're going to see a whack ton of Kenneth Walker, and it's going to be a very they're going to try to control the play more than anything else here instead of going for it, I think.
Well, I think the other thing, too, with the Seahawks is they have other ways to score other than their offense. They can get they have scored. I believe they have the most touchdowns from defense. I think it's close to, I mean, you saw what Shaheed did in the first play in San Francisco. They have other ways to do it. And the thing about the Rams are a really good team. Don't get me wrong, but I also think the Rams have had the ability to slip on a banana peel every now and then. And Sean McVay is a good coach, but he often overthinks it. And those are the two things that I ultimately think will be the difference. I think the Seahawks will find a way to score in a way that is not on an offensive touchdown. And I think the Rams will find a way to slip on a banana peel, because the Rams do slip on banana peels. I mean, yes, they've won one Super Bowl. I will give them credit. McVay is a great coach, but they often overthink things. So that's kind of where I'm at. And I just don't think anybody is as vicious or as angry as the Seattle Seahawks.
If they can get a big play early, like they did against the Niners, Lumen Field's going to be absolutely deafening. and the Rams will be chasing. So let's hope.
Yeah. And we'll see about that Patriots-Broncos game. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating. They're going in with their backup quarterback. A lot of it.
If there was any team and any coach that could pull this off, it's the
Payton.
Broncos with Sean Payton. As much as you can hate on him with the history of with him and the Saints and everything, he's just got that, and that defense is so fucking good.
Yep.
So it's so, but yeah, let's go Seahawks.
Build this into hockey a little later because it will matter, but because I will connect this to the Canucks in a moment here, and even the Flames in a certain sense. But first, every yard, every sack, every interception, and every touchdown with Pick 6, DraftKings' newest game, every snap can turn into a big-time payout. This isn't just watching the game. This is playing to win. Here's how it works. Pick more or less on 2 or more player stats. The better your picks, the bigger your payout. It's that simple. And here's the kickoff bonus. New DraftKings customers get $50 in Pick 6 credits with just a $5 entry on your first pick set. So let's just recap where the Canucks have been the last few games here, last 5 games. They had a 4-1 loss in Columbus to end the road trip. Saturday night, hockey night in Canada, the Edmonton Oilers scored 6 goals in the second period to win 6-0. The Islanders came into Rogers Arena, 4-3 loss to the Islanders. The Canucks finally ended their losing streak, first win in 2026, with a 4-3 win over the Washington Capitals. And then the New Jersey Devils, 3-goal, jumped up to a 3-0 lead. The Canucks did fight back, made a game of this, but ultimately it was a 5-3 loss in the New Jersey Devils. I guess any takeaways from these last 5 games?
I mean, the Columbus and the Edmonton game just suck because those are just deflating. And even though you're in a rebuild and you're going to have those games, you don't want too many of them. At least with the Islanders and the Devils game, they kept it close or made it close, and gave the fans some entertainment in that. And when you are in a rebuild and a youth movement, you need to have those. You need to have more of those games, even if you lose them, than not, because it's fucking expensive to go to hockey games, and people's time is valuable too. So you're going to want to make sure that people are wanting to go to the games, people are wanting to tune in to watch the games, even if the results at the end of the day are not going to be there.
Yeah. It was nice to hear the Foote call. We'll talk a little bit about this more a little bit in depth in a moment here, but Foote's call out of the veterans, I think, sparked something from the veterans. I don't want to include EP40 in this because I actually think he's been playing pretty well. I think that there's an argument that he's been the Canucks MVP this year in a lot of ways. I think that's probably too early to have that conversation, but I think that that's possible. But we saw a couple of good games from Evander Kane. He strung them together. I found that he's been a little bit inconsistent. And Brock Besser finally scored after 20 games without a goal. And he scored a couple of times this week, so that was good. Not too bad from Kevin Lankinen. Z Buium made an impression, although it was in and out of the lineup. He certainly made an impression in that New Jersey Devils game with a nice goal. So some good things, and as you mentioned, I mean, everybody knows where we are, so I guess people's standard has kind of moved a little bit, but it's
well. I think when we talk about the Canucks and all the wording, we've gone through it a lot in terms of rebuild or however you want to call it. You've got once you commit and you say the rebuild term and you start making moves that show that they're rebuilding, which they did this past week with the Sherwood trade. Yes, people's expectations need to be reset. You cannot be looking at it's it's more about the process of individual players as opposed to the process of the team, which sounds weird, but it is. You want to see players like Evander Kane, Teddy Blueger, who came back from injury, and and players who could be trade chips going into the trade deadline play well, because that'll help their trade value. You want players like Zeev Buyum and Liam Ogren and the DPD, Tom Villander. You want your young players to show well, because that's the future, and that helps give fans hope in terms of what's going on next season and beyond. And so instead of looking at it as in like, oh, they were chasing the game again, and which has been a pattern this season. Yeah, this team is not good enough. We understand that. That's why they're rebuilding, right? And so you have to take a look at that and go, all right, even if you have to take, and Kev, I know you took exception to this to this take and tweet that Wide Art put out about how the last game versus the Devils was a perfect tank game. And again, you and I agree on the word tank. I think is it's insulting to the players, and it's frustrating for anyone who has a lick of competitiveness in them to hear, because you do not play the game to lose. You do not watch the game to watch your team lose. Like, you want them to win. So we understand the thought process, we still don't like it. But if you take your expectations down and know that the Canucks are rebuilding, that's exactly like, if you're going to lose, you're going to have EP40 Elias Pettersson playing goalie when the net is empty, making a save. They're down by 2 with an empty net. They find a way to score a goal, and then it makes you feel better about watching the games, and that's all you want right now. You want to feel like you're seeing Elias Pettersson started to find his game, whether that is a trade chip that they can use or he's part of the solution. You want, again, as I going back, you want the young players to play well. You want the vets who could be trade chips play well, while still losing, so you can have the best chance to get a Gavin McKenna or a Stenberg, right? And like, again, it's frustrating because I still can't wrap my competitive brain around it and say, look, I'm cheering for them to lose. I want them to do well, and I want all these players to play well. So it's that's why rebuilds and tanking is so tough, and it's a tough sell to anyone other than the people who are so invested in a certain way of building a team.
I have a new term. I was thinking about this last night. I have a rebuild fatigue. I have fatigue on just the constant discussion about whether or not they're doing it right, and the constant discussion on how to do it right, and the constant discussion on how to do it wrong. Yeah.
Because there's no one right way and there's no one wrong way.
That too, yeah, that's the other part of this. But it just feels like, I realized since 2011, the two teams that I follow, the Flames and the Canucks, have combined to win 6 playoff rounds. And I was watching that Oilers-Capitals game last night, and that Rogers Place was just rocking. That was a hell of a hockey game between those two teams. Like, it was back and forth, high scoring, energetic. There was a little bit of intensity from both of these teams. There was chirping on the bench. The crowd was into it. And I'm like, watching the Flames and the Canucks right now, I just wish we could we not be there? Could we not like we just spent a good amount of time, like at the start of this podcast, talking about how good the Seattle Seahawks were. I remember, I'm not putting you on the spot, but like the whole Game 7 between the Blue Jays and the Dodgers in the World Series. And yes, you were just heartbroken, and I get it. I was heartbroken when the Mariners lost to the Blue Jays. I just want that for my hockey. That's what I want. And I just feel like I'm just tired of being in this same damn conversation for years.
Yeah, which is why we're excited for the Olympics, right, Kev?
Absolutely. Yes, the Olympics are a week away. We're in the final week before the Olympics. And just on a sidebar, couple of games to watch out for. There is the Tampa Bay, Florida game, which is they love each other. It is a hug fest. And
now that Kachuk's back.
Yeah, it'll be more warmth and charm, that I'm sure. The other one I wanted people to remind of before the Olympics, it's Connor Bedard versus Macklin Celebrini are playing at the last day of the before the Olympics, and that will be fun.
Also, Kev, like again, we're doing some behind the scenes some behind the scenes stuff here. Kevin got all upset with Tom Wilson when the Capitals were in Calgary facing the Flames. Just wait till he's doing that to the Tkachuk brothers in the Olympics there, Kev.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun. Him and Drew Doughty versus the Tkachuk brothers. That'll be fun. Let's get to some Canuck news, and then we're going to kind of dive into a couple of rebuild conversations here. Kiefer Sherwood was traded this week. He was traded to San Jose for 2 seconds and a defenseman by the name of Cole Clayton, who reported immediately to Abbotsford. And it was kind of an emotional press conference or media availability for Kiefer Sherwood as he left. Of course, congratulations to him and his wife as he is expecting. I think the Canucks came out very well from here. Clayton, by the way, a right-hand shot. He was not drafted in the NHL, but he's from Strathmore, Alberta, 25 years old. He played in the WHL with the Medicine Hat Tigers. He played in the AHL with the Cleveland Monsters, and he has now played 3 games with the Abbotsford Canucks. No points, 5 minutes, a penalty, five penalty minutes, and a -2. Yeah, I think the Canucks came out really well here. Now you've got 4 picks within the first 50, which I think is really good within the next couple of years. You're building some much needed draft capital, which I think one of the things the Canucks have kind of missed the last few years is they've traded a lot of draft capital away in an attempt to win. So I think it's good that they recovered that.
Yeah, 2 second-round picks is fantastic. Clayton's a good body down for the Abbotsford Canucks. And again, it's always good to get a right shot defenseman in there. You can never have enough of those in the system. And then you're going to have 2 first-round picks plus the Canucks second-round pick, which will be 32nd through 35th at this point. Because you have to remember that the Ottawa Senators are giving up their first-round pick this year because of
yes, that's right.
Punishment. So they're forfeiting it. So the second-round pick will be 32nd overall this year. I got into this on social media about the second-round picks and early second-round picks. To be honest, as long as you're within the first 5-10 picks of 5 to 10 picks of the second round, you're in a good spot. I don't think you should be quibbling over tanking so that you can have the first or as high a second round pick as possible, because there's not much between a lot of those players in that range usually. And it comes down to more luck and development than it does to anything else. And yes, maybe there's a highly coveted player, but how many of those highly coveted players come draft day in that range turn out to be nothing, or someone who isn't quite as highly coveted passes them over once things are all said and done. So I don't think it's if you're going to try and sell tanking for a higher second round pick, to me. I think that's used car salesman putting lipstick on a pig type stuff. And while I understand you trying to sort of cope your way into it and try to sell yourself on it, let's just be honest. If you're pro tank and and everything, it's all about the top of the first round. And anything else, it's all on your scouting staff and your player development staff more than it is whether you're picking 32nd, 33rd, or 36th. So I think
You can.
How many times do you see in those like late first round, early second round, where you have all these online scouts who they do bring a lot of. Let me preface, they do bring a lot of value, but they also they're flawed, just like NHL scouts and amateur NHL scouts are. But the amount of times I've seen players that drop, and everyone's all up in arms wondering why, and then they don't turn out to do anything or average at best, or even like just get a cup of tea in the NHL. There's a reason they drop, right? So it's about development and supporting your players and trusting your draft team, your scouts and your draft team more than focusing on finishing drafting in a certain spot.
That round 2 to 7 is always, it's fascinating to me because it's not like I don't claim to be any scout but I always just kind of look back and I look at where championships are won or lost. It's what you've done. It's not necessarily how you drafted in round 2 to 7, but how you've managed. I hate this word, but I'm just going to have to use it for the basis of my argument. The asset management of round 2 to 7 is how you win championship. That's basically the difference between winning and losing to me.
Whether you're getting good players, drafting good players that become key parts of your team, or using those picks to acquire good players that become key parts to your team, is where championships are won and lost. Yes.
And by the way, the Canucks are not doing too bad in that area. I mean, a lot of talk has been made about the first round picks, which is totally fair. But DPD was a later round pick. Sawyer Mignon was a later round pick. Karel Kudrasev was also a later round pick as well. So as much as people have been kind of debating the Filip Hronek trade for the first round pick and not getting Axel Sandin Patelka, they kind of more than made up with that with their drafting after that, right? So,
they let just it was the first draft under Albion and Rutherford was the 2022 draft. Am I correct on that, or was it 2021? I think it's 2022, and that was Jonathan LeCaire. Yeah, Jonathan LeCaire-Mecki. DPD in round 3. You have Ty Young in round 5, Karel Kudratsev in round 7. That's looking like an okay draft. They had Hunter Brzustevich and Sawyer Mignon in 2023 in round 3. Ty Mueller is another player. You don't sleep on him. They're quite high on him. He was a 4th round pick, as was Vilmar Ulriksson, who just turned pro this year. So then you've got Anthony Romani and Riley Patterson, and there are players that the Canucks have got second round and beyond that are looking solid right now. There's still a long way to go on a lot of these players. They're still quite young, but you have to find a way to get at least provide organizational depth in those rounds and become good pros, whether that's AHL or ideally NHL. And it looks like, at least when you look at the 2022 draft with DPD, Ty Young, and Karel Kudratsev, and then you look at the 2023 draft, yes, they traded Hunter Brzustevich away in an attempt to go deep in the playoffs. But Sawyer Mignon looks good. Ty Mueller looks like a solid player. Vilmar Ulriksson is an intriguing prospect. If they can get his development right, watch out. But after that, it's still very very early for a lot of these players.
Yep. The other news this week was the return of Filip. He actually almost made it back to the Washington game, but it turned out he ended up playing a New Jersey game. Teddy Blueger also returned the lineup. That was the first time in a while that they had Pettersson, Chytil, and Blueger in the lineup with David Kampf. They had 4 natural centers in the lineup. I believe that was one of the first times this year they actually were able to present to that. Good to see Filip Chytil back. Hopefully everything is okay. We know with concussions, everything can be different. So as Martin Prospelso said with the Flames, when he came back this week, if you got a headache, take your time. I think to everyone, just be patient with Filip Chytil. This would be an ongoing process. Unfortunately, he's had a number of concussions, but good to see him back, and good to see Teddy Blueger back as well.
Yeah. Both had very long roads back from their injuries, and they were able to move Matt Stesson over to the wing. Now that you've got Kampf and those two back in, as well as Elias Pettersson down the middle. They now have, outside of not really having a true number 2 center, they've got center depth again, and I wouldn't be surprised if Teddy Blueger is traded before the trade deadline this year. He would provide some nice depth for a contender and a team looking to go deep in the playoffs. But the Canucks do have, like I said, they've got Matt Stesson, who has been a nice college free agency find for the Canucks. They've got Atu Ratu, who's also an option down the middle as well, who's also still not that old as well. So they have got some players that they can slide into that role once if they do end up trading Teddy Blueger.
Yep. The unfortunate part here is still no word on Thatcher Demko. Patrick Alvin did say in the Kiefer Sherwood press availability that they were going to look at other options in terms of other opinions in terms of what to do with Demko. This is where I also kind of split with some of the people involved in hockey commentary. Yes, unfortunately, you signed Thatcher Demko to a contract, but I have not heard enough. I cannot imagine being Thatcher Demko at this point. That injury that he sustained during the playoffs a couple of years ago, he had the frustration about what was going on there. He tried to come back. He hasn't played bad when he's been in the lineup. It's just, I think, very unfortunate that he hasn't been in the lineup. And I just imagine that this is just a very frustrating time for him. And hopefully he comes back to play hockey. At this point, I think I think you work with Demko, figure out find out what the actual timeline is and everything. And if he can come back, I think to play this year, and it makes sense. I think you still do it. I know what people is just shut him down for the sake of the quote unquote tank. But you also need to make sure that you're doing best by the players, because going forward, you want players who want to play as a Canuck. You want players who want to be in Vancouver. You want players who take pride wearing the blue, green, and white, or the black, yellow, and red of the skate jersey. So you want players to take pride in being part of the organization. And part of that is to be supportive of them, and not just being so cold-hearted about it and shutting him down just for the sake of the tank. Yeah. So I think if you're, but that being said, if it's even if it's 1 or 2 games at the end of the season and he wants to play, let him play. Honestly, you want to provide fix the culture in this team. Fixing the culture in this team is part of the project of this rebuild,
And part of that is to make sure that, yes, you have players who want to play here and you're supporting the players properly that are there.
Yep. And not only that, if you consider what might happen in the playoffs, you know that there's going to be a team that's going to question their goaltending when they are eliminated from the playoffs. So getting him some ice time might get you some value if you consider trading him in the offseason to a team. I don't think that that's not off the table. I think that that's certainly a possibility that you have to consider. So
it's probably they're listening. I don't think they're shopping him, but I think they're listening. And I think people need to we need to remind people that there's a massive difference.
Yes.
Alan Walsh went on a rant about that with Filip Ronek about how there were so many like reports that teams are phoning about Filip Ronek. Yeah, of course they are. Every contender should be phoning every rebuilding team, seeing who isn't available, or IDing players that they would like to add, seeing if they're available, and going from there. And the rebuilding teams, they would not be doing their job. The GMs would not be doing their jobs if they aren't listening.
Yeah.
To any veteran. And just because the plan isn't to trade, that isn't part of it. Any trade offer for players like a Filip Chytil or a Thatcher Demko, Filip Ronek and a Thatcher Demko are going to have to blow the socks off to get that deal done.
Yep.
That's what people need to understand. And people need to remember that when looking at all these quote unquote rumors that surround right now. So, and even like, it's just, there's so much noise that you have to continue to create more noise about it to stay relevant. And even the top insiders like Elliot Friedman and even like Darren Drager and Rick Dollywall, they all sort of just it's become less about like getting a couple sources and then reporting, and it's more about just if you hear something, you report it and see what sticks, unfortunately. And that's what one of my biggest frustrations with the rebuild fatigue, Kev. I've gotten so fatigued over trade rumors because 90% of them are bullshit. 90% of them are just, oh, I heard that a team called about a player. And did anything go beyond that? No. Then why are you reporting it?
Well, you know what? Can I add to this just a little bit here? The thing that frustrates me more is the lack of critical thinking when we're posting some of this stuff. And it's like, oh my God. Like, for example, and I will use this as an example. When Elliot Friedman reported that the Canucks made an offer to Kiefer Sherwood, the amount of criticism that this organization got for asking about a player to see what their contract offer was nonsense. That is due diligence. That is what teams do. You ask about what the contract offer is. So maybe that contract offer could impact what another team is looking at in terms of a trade chip, right? It doesn't mean that they're going to keep Kiefer Sherwood. You saw all of these things. Oh, they're going to keep Kiefer Sherwood. They're offering a contract. How unserious is this organization? I'm brilliant because I know about the tank and I use big words. Can you please listen to me in my Twitter profile? Retweet me, please. God, it's douchey. It's absolutely fucking douchey and unintelligent. And you act like it's not one person. There's a group of people that do this. They act like they're the smartest people in the room, and there's context to this conversation. Like, what are we doing here? Sorry,
yeah.
What are we doing here?
Well, one thing I think there's a lack of curiosity anymore.
Yes.
It's just immediate. There's an immediate sort of. It's interesting. I was yesterday morning. Producer Heidi and I got up and we were watching a cooking show because that's just relaxing Saturday morning stuff for adults now, apparently. and this guy was so enthusiastic and was geeking out about the food and was drawing you in because he had that, like, he had the enthusiasm and the charisma, but he was also an absolute geek about it. And then I started thinking about the difference between like that and then you got sports media, and maybe this is me pigeonholing and creating sort of definitions out of my ass, but the geek versus nerd. When you geek out about something, you've got that, again, that enthusiasm, that excitement, and you're drawing people in because of that. When you nerd, when you've got these like I told you so sort of nerd sort of vibes that a lot of people do on social media, and like I'll call myself out on that. I probably do that too. I think we all do at times.
Yes,
and
social media at times.
Yeah, and so like when you're doing that, you're shutting people down as opposed to inviting people in for discussion. I think that's one of the problems right now with how a lot of this gets covered is, yeah, everyone's sort of trying to be the nerd about it, and everyone's trying to come across as the smartest person in the room, as opposed to being willing to have a discussion and just be more curious about, okay, why would they do that? Like, just even if it's just a discussion in your head, as you said, Kev, with they put an offer out. They were probably, it was probably just due diligence onto knowing what a potential contract offer is, and so that they could tell the serious teams, probably even San Jose, who made the trade with Kiefer Sherwood, a ballpark figure on what they're looking at if they want to extend him.
I'm not.
And I think
any particular person, by the way, about the way that they're acting on social media. It's just sort of a kind of a general.
It is a general thing, because it's a general thing that's not just sports media related either. It's infested all of social media, regardless of the topic. Everyone becomes experts, and everyone starts criticizing as opposed to asking why. Like legitimate curiosity, like asking why would they do this in a curious way, as opposed to a standoffish, like, why would you do that? Like, there's a difference, and I think that nuance unfortunately has been lost. And unfortunately, the reason why I get so hard on the media at times is because they play into that. Instead of actually doing good, like, reporting and pushing people's thought processes, they just lean into the emotional side and lead into the overreaction side for clicks, engagement, and all that. So, which again, if you take a big step, the monster that media has become, they feel like they need to do that, but I think we need to find a way to start fighting back and demanding just more nuanced and well thought out discussions, as opposed to just clickbait, rage bait. How dare they attitudes that a lot of people have, and the leaning into it.
Yeah. So let's touch on a couple of topics for the Canucks. I think the thing that happened this week after the Islanders game was Adam Foote called out the vets, and a quote that kind of permeated through that locker room a little bit here in terms of the play of the vets, and that just talking about the body language, guys slamming their sticks and going to the bench, and something that has not only been happening this year, but happened, of course, during the Rick Tocchet era, and is something that Adam Foote called out for years. And he basically, he didn't specify anybody. He said the vets. So he kind of put a blanket on this. And we saw certainly, I think, a bit of a more of an effort of last two games after the Washington game and the Jersey game, a little bit more of an effort, especially I think Evander Kane kind of seemed like to take this a little bit to heart. We finally saw Brock Besser score a goal. Jake DeBrusk, I think, was trying to hold himself to account. He did have a healthy scratch moment earlier before Christmas, and I think he's been certainly better since he's been back in the lineup. But where are you at with this one? Or
Yeah, you're gonna need to. I liked that from Foote. I think it was actually probably overdue. Ever since the body language and how frustrated players have looked at times has permeated through this team since beginning of last year. And yeah, you're gonna have to find they have to be better, especially the vets, because you've got when you're rebuilding. And this is one of the pitfalls of rebuilds, and especially when you quote unquote embrace the tank, is that you're a shitty team. So it's going to suck. Especially when you have very competitive players, they're going to get frustrated. So you have to find a way to sort of tap dance and toe that line of being competitive and being angry and being frustrated, but not letting it take over and then having your play suffer. So yeah, I liked it. I think, as I said, I think it was overdue. Honestly, it was overdue. We needed to hear this from Foote at least a couple weeks ago. Honestly, I would have loved to have heard it like closer to the Hughes trade. Just say that they need to step up and need to be accountable, because they need to set the example of what the Canucks need to be, what the younger players need to be for the team to be successful in 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, I think a little bit overdue. I feel like Adam Foote was trying to kind of be the nice guy in the media, and I think I'm sure he kind of pushed it in private, but it was good to hear him kind of call out the vets publicly. I think it needed to happen here. So a couple of other things here. One, that your question is, and I think how long do we have to put up with this, Sean? I think that there's been a discussion about the timeline of the rebuild. I think there's some people out there that feel that if it's not more than 3 years, and this was not a rebuild, it was simply a retool, depending on their classification. But I just, of course, remind you again, the Canucks have had 3 playoff series wins since 2011. I think there's probably some people that in this market that do have the appetite to go a little longer. I think there's some people in this market that simply do not. I think that the Canucks have to play that balancing act. What are you thinking here in terms of this timeline?
Well, if we go back to the Jim Rutherford interviews, he talked about a 2 to 3 year expectation, sort of timeline. But I think the question is not necessarily what number people are banting about, whether it's the 2-3 years that Jim Rutherford talks about, or the 4 or 5 years that some other people have talked about, or longer. It's where's the team at the end of that? Where's the team at the 3 years, that 2 to 3 years that Jim Rutherford is talking about, or the 4 to 5 that other people are talking about? What's the end goal at that? Is that after 2 to 3 years they're building up, so they're hoping to make the step into the playoffs, or are they already a playoff team? I think that's a huge piece of information that is missing in this conversation. Because if they're going 2 to 3 years, and then after that they're like, okay, if everything goes right, they get the lottery luck. So they get this year, that would mean getting McKenna or Stenberg, and then they've got some other they have other pieces that can step up and be top end players for them. I think 2 to 3 years, and you're stepping into the playoffs. You haven't been in the playoffs yet since you've made this decision, and you're making you're making moves to take that next step into the playoffs. I think that's fair. But if you're expecting them to be a playoff team in 2 to 3 years, no, I don't think that's fair. So I think that's when I suggested we have this conversation. I think that's the way I want to look at it. Is it's not necessarily all these numbers that people are throwing out there in terms of length of time that it's going to take for this rebuild to happen. It's okay, at the end of that timeline, where is this team sitting? And I think you need to have that conversation and figure out if it's say a three-year time period, and then they from now and in year so starts, yes, I would say start of year 4, and they're making moves to get back into the playoffs, like adding some smart veteran players at the right with the right deals, then yeah, I think that's a fair timeline. But if people come up with the expectation that that Rutherford and Albin want to be in the playoffs in year 3, I think that's where the expectations are going to become askew.
Well, you look at Anaheim, who I still don't think is quite there yet. They've missed the playoffs for at least 5 years in a row. San Jose has been on a pretty long run, and now they're competing for the playoffs. I think it was more than 5. Montreal was 5 years, and I think they're at the step that they are a playoff contender, but I would not call them a Stanley Cup championship contender yet. Then you get Ottawa, who stepped into the playoff contender mode last year and have taken a massive step back this year with a number of different issues, including the goaltending situation. So these things are just not linear, right? These things are not like, oh, well, we'll build like this and then we're going to step into our window. There is a pitfall and a trip up that happens all the time. I think if you even talk to some Oiler fans privately, and I know you often talk to Graham, I think that there's some Oiler fans that believe that the Oilers in their McDavid rebuild should feel that they should have been in the Cup Finals a lot earlier than they actually were. So, and they even had some step backs before they've been to where they are as well. Of course, people forget the Peter Chiarelli, let's trade everybody to save my job moments in November of a couple of years ago before they fired Todd McClellan and kind of brought in Ken Hitchcock. They've had their pitfalls as well. So to your point, you're not going to be a Stanley Cup contender in 3 years. That's just not a realistic expectation when you're going through these.
Exactly, right? Yeah, if the Canucks can be where, say, Anaheim is right now, or Montreal, yeah, I think those are your two best, and Utah in 3 to 4 years. Then you're good. You're pushing for a playoff spot. You've got some good young players who are big key players for you. The reason I think that they can push that 3-year window is because of the group that they have on the blue line: Zeev Buium, Tom Villander, D. Petey. Those are 3 players that you're going to be building around, let alone some of the other sort of players, Kudryavtsev, Mignot, Mancini. They've got that. It takes a lot longer to learn how to play good defense at the NHL level as a defender than it does to become a competent and competent forward who can produce at a high level. For the top end players. Yeah. So I think it's with that in mind, I think they can, which is why I think when all this talk about trading Elias Pettersson, if you trade him, you're looking at 5+ years, because is Gavin McKenna or Ivar Stenberg stepping in and becoming a superstar right away? Probably not. You look at Bedard, you look at Celebrini is turning out to be way better than people thought, but for the most part, like it still takes a couple years for those forward players to become that true superstar player. But it is quicker than the majority of defensemen that take in. Yes, you're going to have the Quinn Hugheses, the Matthew Schaefers, even the Lane Hudsons. Moritz Seider is actually even more of a, I would say, outlier, where they step in and are already like true like top pair defensemen as teenagers or young players. Usually, it takes a couple years to get to the point where you can be there, and then another couple years to get into that upper echelon of players that you need them to be if you want you consider a contender.
Yeah.
So I think which is why trading Pettersson might be sort of it's going to be a hot button topic because of the quote unquote the timeline that we're sort of discussing here. Is if they think that a 3 year sort of a rebuild of a timeline of 3 years, that's only feasible with PD as part of the solution. Because I don't think you're going to get a player who can step in and be a key part of this rebuild in a trade for PD that can keep that timeline on track. So I think that's part of the reason why, again, with the whole rebuild fatigue, is like you get every day seems to be a different. Should they trade this person? Should they trade this person? Should they trade this person? Which again, it's fine. Like there is an appetite out there for that conversation, but I think there should be. I think people need to understand that there's a lot of fatigue on that by a lot of people. Yeah. And I think if you're going to have that discussion, I think you need to have that discussion about what does the timeline look like if you move a Elias Pettersson, if you move a Filip, if you move a Thatcher Demko. I got into a little bit of this timeline discussion on social media, probably about a week or so ago, before the Sherwood trade, and I think part of that issue, that conversation, is the goaltending. You've got Ty Young, you've got Nikita Tolopilo in Abbotsford, you've got Demko and Lankinen up here, and then you've got Medvedev, who they drafted in the second round this past draft, playing for the London Knights, who is a young goalie who they are very high on. But you also have to remember that with goaltenders, that the timeline for their development is a little bit longer than even defensemen. You look at what they did with Demko and how it took him till, I think, his draft year +4 to break in and at least be a backup for the Canucks, and let alone a starter. So you're looking in that 3 year timeline. Medvedev may be knocking on the door, maybe, but he might still be a year or two behind that. You never know. He's actually on the younger side of things. He was I think within a month of being eligible for this year's draft, not last year's. So people have to also remember that. So I think it's, as I said, I think the conversation that I thought we needed to the conversation we needed to have was, throwing out these numbers is all fine, but where is this team at the end of those the timelines that Rutherford has put out, that people in the media and the fan base have put out? And I think if you're saying 2 to 3 years, 4 to 5 years, like 2 to 3 years, and they're in where, say, Utah was last year, at the end of year 3, then they're on track, because then you're showing promise. You've got people thinking that they can take that next step. That's good. And then hopefully they can take the step like Anaheim has, like Utah has this year, where you're battling for a playoff spot and legitimately could be considered a team on the rise with a young core. Yeah. But if you're expecting them to be already in the playoffs at that point, and that's your made up expectation based off of the 2 to 3 year timeline that Jim Rutherford has put out there, you're in for disappointment, and I think you need to rethink things.
Yeah. Well, the other part of this conversation, and you're right on your part, but the other part of this conversation that also is not talked about is, sure, right, you get a top 5 pick. That's nobody is disputing that you should get one of the best players in the draft if you're getting a top 5 pick. Sure. I agree with that. But I guess the question that I never is asked in terms of rebuilding, and I think the thing maybe that deep down inside frustrated me and I'm just bringing this up from a Calgary perspective here, Sean, but I want to bring this into the conversation. The Tom Wilson shenanigans against Calgary on Friday, part of the problem, I think, from the Flames perspective is now with the Rasmus Anderson trade, you are struggling to find what your identity is. And it's all fine and good to talk about a rebuild and saying how many years. That's one part of it. But what are we building? What are we doing here? What type of team are we wanting the Vancouver Canucks to be when they start becoming a contender again? I think that we kind of know what Anaheim is. They're a team kind of chaos right now. That's kind of their identity. Will it be sustainable for them? Don't know. Montreal is kind of getting back to their speedy, skatey ways. They're starting to develop an identity. But even if you watch that Vegas-Toronto game with Mitch Marner returning to Toronto, one of the things that Elliot Friedman has said, and I've mentioned this on here before, are you a team or are you a club? And I think that that's part of trying to figure out where, like, you can hate on Vegas all you want for what they've done. That's a team. That's a team that was willing to fight for Mitch Marner at whatever cost. And that's just where I think the Canucks, like, what are we building? What is the identity of this team going forward? What do we want about the Vancouver Canucks? Like, you look back at 2011, they wore the black hat. They had an identity. We knew what the Vancouver Canucks were, like him or not. They had an identity. And I think that that's been something really that's been lacking for some time. What are we building here? Nobody talks about this. Yes, it's great to develop assets and get high picks, but the teams that are championship successful, like the Florida Panthers, there's an identity with them. The Edmonton Oilers, like it or not, there's an identity to them. You know what to expect when you got an Oilers game. Do we know that with the Canucks? Yeah, that's the other question.
Well, I think part of that is that you don't know what the players that they're going to draft are. I think they once you know whether it's like how you build a team around Gavin McKenna versus Ivar Stenberg is probably going to be different, right? How you build a team, and then if you don't get either of those players, then it's going to be a completely different conversation. So I think that part of it is you need to understand what players you're getting. And as opposed to just like saying, okay, we want to build this team, like this is our ideal team, but you have to be willing to move based off of who's available and what draft picks you're getting. And I think that's part of it. And that's why I said, like, we don't know the identity of what this team's going to be because we don't have a key piece that they're going to build around. I don't think that as good as Steve William could be, I don't think that's the key piece that they're going to build around. Ideally, it's going to be McKenna or Stenberg if they can get one of the top two picks here. And if they do, then that's going to be your key piece, and that's how you build your identity. Is you look at what is their strength and how do you support them, and then how do you create that identity. So when you go back to Anaheim, as we've got Dylan in the chat here, questioning your comment of team of chaos, and saying that they, based on drafting, they built around size and speed. I think that's part of what Kevin's talking about there, Dylan, is the size and speed is creating chaos, but I still think they're still finding their true identity.
That's a really raw team. When you watch the Anaheim Ducks,
yeah.
it's a team like you remember. I was one of the games that I'll use as an example is the game that they played against the Canucks in Anaheim, where that was just that was a game that was drunk, really. Like that, like it's just. They can score at will, but they'll allow goals at will. I don't think their defensive structure is quite where they want it to be, especially with a guy like Joel Quenneville behind the bench. It's a raw team. which right now feels like chaos to me. And that's fine. They're growing. They'll be good as we continue through this conversation. But yeah, you're right. Size, speed. Yeah.
And I think with Anaheim, who's their key player that they're building around is Leo Carlson, right? And what makes him strong, and what makes him the key? Why are they making him the key piece? And I think that's what they need to ask. And I think that when you look at that, it's they are young, and that's part of like, again, back to the conversation of the timeline. If the Canucks, and for you, Kev, the Flames in 3 years are in a position where they're like the Ducks, they've got some good young players, they're skilled, but they're a little undisciplined in terms of their systems. You kind of want that, because that means you've got you're on track. Right? So Dylan, don't take the chaos as an insult. It's a good thing, because every team's going to go through that, and then they have to figure out how to change things. Like the moves that the Ducks made this off season, and even into last year when they picked up Trouba, they've got Kreider, they went out and got Mikael Granlund as well. Like they're adding some, and even going back a couple years, the adding of Radko Gudas, adding good veterans that can help insulate these players is huge. Which again is why we go back in the circles of fighting over what a rebuild is and what a tear down and everything needs to look like. Is you still need veterans to show them the way, which is why Adam Foote calling out the vets this past week was good and overdue.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in terms of saying what kind of team we want the Canucks to be, I want to see who they get in the draft this year before making that decision.
All right. And by
I do think you want someone who's good. You want a team that's going to be outside of what's on the ice. You want a team that's hardworking. You want a team that's proud to be you want players in that team and that team culture that's proud to be Canucks.
Yeah.
You want people. You want a ride or die, and you want like a ride or die mentality, a Wolfpack mentality, which is what this Canucks team has been missing. This whole core, ever since they got rid of Bo Horvat, I think that's what's been missing, is this ride or die Wolfpack mentality, and you need to build that. So you need the right combination of skilled players, gritty players, and young players and old players when they're ready. But to be big, you need to start building up those prospects. You can ID, especially in the second round and beyond, even the late first round and beyond. You can ID players with speed and smarts and stuff to help with an idea of what the type of team you want. But until you know what your top end players look like, you cannot create an identity without that.
Yeah. But I do think I understand what you're saying, but I think that it is something that is part of that nuance of the discussion. I think it's just easy to talk about rebuild and tank and find that first pick. The difference, again, one of the differences between championship teams and not is finding that identity and finding that team, that ride or die. And I think that is an important part of that element. Yes, the Canucks are not there yet. They don't have their superstar player that they're building around yet. That's coming. But that's why I wanted to bring that up, because I think it is an important part of this. It's easy to say rebuild. It's very easy to have a timeline around rebuild. But what are you building, right? As Dan said a couple of years ago when we were talking about this, you can't rebuild if you haven't really built. When we were talking about the Arizona Coyotes at that particular point in time. So, yeah. And by the way, Dylan, I've watched more than one game of the Anaheim Ducks. Give me a break. So, stop.
But yeah, like I think they are still, like I said, the Ducks, because like you look at also the identity of a team when they're in the sort of rebuild phase or building phase versus when they're in the contender phase can change.
Yeah, there's
as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think you can. Which is why, like I said, until they know if it's Gavin McKenna, Ivar Stenberg, or Canucks don't get the draft luck and they're drafting third or later, depending on where they finish. I think it's. I think you can't make that decision until you know who you're building around.
Yeah. Fair. You know the game, now make it pay. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN. Play just $5 and get $50 in Pick 6 credits. Make the call. Ride the upside in partnership with DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-878-9777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus. Age and eligibility restrictions vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. One per new customer. Bonus awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 14 days. Terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Limited time offer. Okay, let's pick one of these three topics to kind of dig in here. Do you want to talk about Mitch Marner's return to Toronto, the Rasmus Anderson trade to Vegas, or the MVP conversation? Which is the one that salivates you at this?
Let's do the Anderson to Vegas, because I think it covers the other team that the Shifts and Pucks podcast covers.
We did do a breakdown of that as well that you can listen to. We did that Monday morning with Dan and Matt. So kind of from your perspective, what were your thoughts on the trade?
I mean, it's kind of what I expected, honestly. He's a pending UFA. Yes, right shot defenseman, which holds a little bit more value. But he's not a true top end defenseman in this league. In the right situation and with the right team, he can be a top pair defenseman, but he's not the defenseman you're going to build a defense pair around, and he's not a defenseman that you're going to build your blue line around. So getting Zach Whitecloud as just a sort of a body makes sense for the Flames, because they still need that, and they still need to insulate their young defensemen and not rush them into the NHL. And then you've got a first round pick that's top 10 protected in 2027, and then they've got a 2028 second round pick that can be a first round pick, which is it's good, but I think I'm not sure how much more they would have gotten for him, especially without the extension in place. I think the biggest difference, like, between that and say the Lindholm trade, is the Hunter Brzustevich factor. There is, like, there was a prospect the Flames got in that deal that made that people are very high on, and you're not getting that in this one. So you're, in terms of future assets that the Flames received, Abram Wiebe he's a project, and then that first round pick is not till next year. So you're potentially not seeing the fruitions of this deal until 2030. So I think I can understand why there was a little bit of letdown with it, but I think it's still, when you look at the price of everything, it's well within reason, and I'm not sure how much more they would have gotten even if they had made the trade in the offseason or last year.
Yeah, I think a lot of the results of this trade comes from a wait and see perspective here, because it is a ways down the road before you see what's going to happen. If Vegas wins the Cup this year, that 2028 turns into a first round pick. So that is dependent upon, and then Zach Whitecloud is a guy that, and maybe they trade Zach Whitecloud, maybe they don't, but that could be an impact and part of the trade result as well. And Abram Wiebe sounds like he's a project, but he did play with Cole Reshny, and in University of North Dakota. He was also played with Veerhoff, who's considered in the top 3 right now. So that's maybe it. But yeah, I think ultimately the Flames came out. They didn't come out like bandits with this, but they probably. I've used this term on Flames Twitter a little bit more, but I think it does relate a little bit to Canucks Twitter. I think that there's a lot of fantasy booking when we talk about these trades. Dan says this all the time. We rate our own prospects higher, our own players higher than I think league wide Rasmus Andersson is, or anybody that you're expecting to trade. One of the things that is going to disappoint a lot of Flame fans is the return of Nazem Kadri, because I think that there is a way too high of an expectation of a return of Nazem Kadri. And that is not only from this year and the struggles. This was going back to last year where everybody thought that he would get. There are people thinking that that's the Brock Nelson return, and I just can't buy that. I didn't buy it last year. I'm not buying it now. I just don't think that Nazem Kadri is going to get you that. I think the probably the big trade chip for the Flames is probably Blake Coleman. I could see people overpaying for him, but they're not going to overpay for a 37-year-old Nazem Kadri or mid-30s Nazem Kadri. Just wasn't going to happen. And so I think
35-year-old Nazem Kadri with 3 years at $7 million left. I know the cap's going up, but that's still a lot of money to sink into a mid to late 30s center who has played a very physical game in his career. So yeah, I don't think that. And then Coleman, I don't think you're going to see an overpayment for Coleman, but you will get market value, which is still good.
Yeah, he's going to be a guy. Like, I think a lot of teams rightly should be interested in Blake Coleman. He's a guy that's going to absolutely help you in a playoff run, not in a top 3-6 role, but a middle 6 role. Like the way that Brad Marchand helped the Panthers, I could see Blake Coleman kind of making a similar impact. I could see that. But really also, I know that some people were a little upset that one of the players I saw that was a comp was, Brandon Carlo for Fraser Minten. Fraser Minten was an early 2nd-round pick, so around the pick that you're getting for the Vegas now. So that's a pretty comparable. I mean, Fraser Minten has kind of taken off this year. We don't know. Again, we don't know what that other player is going to look like. So again, I think they.
Yeah, and I think the issue again is the timeline there, Kev. I think it's it's a 2028 pick.
Yep.
And so again, you're not looking regardless of it being a 2nd or a 1st-round pick. There, you're looking at 2031 if you do end up using that pick and drafting a player. You're looking at most likely 2031 at the earliest to seeing the fruitions of that, which again is why I think there's I think you can say that that's a rightful criticism, but I think that then when you actually look at the value of things, it's not significantly worse than what they got for Lindholm. It's not the Hanifin trade where they got really hamstrung there. Yeah.
And that's the other part of this conversation that probably deserves more depth then, but I don't think Rasmus Andersson handcuffed the organization in any way. And I think people have to remember this isn't EA NHL 25 where you can just trade a player for a player and everybody is going to live happily ever after. There are families, agents, and situations involved in this conversation. And maybe the player doesn't have a full no move, but they damn sure can determine where they want to play. And and they will have a say in it. Mikko Rantanen, perfect example. Traded to Carolina, went, sorry, dude, I'm out. And then they had to move on. And they got pretty good value for him. But players, players are in more control than I think people care to admit. You just can't toss people. You can't just trade people to somewhere and expect everyone to live happily ever after.
Well, the thing, I guess he had a no move clause, and he has every right to he had the movement. He had control. He has every right to exercise that, right? That's the thing. That's what happens when you have those players. You give those no trades and no movement clauses to players, is that you give them more control over where they go, and you don't. It can hurt their trade value. So I think getting a first round pick, a second round pick, a body for most likely a body for the Wranglers when all things are said and done, and then a player that you could move either whenever, whether it's at the deadline or the off season or next year, for more assets is a good deal.
Yep. I'm just here to tell you all, expect disappointment in your trades. Don't have hope.
Well, I think it's understanding that what these trade, like, instead of hyper focusing on certain players and exact returns, you need the framework. So a prospect, a first round pick, a prospect, and then a later round pick type deal. If you can nail that down and as an expectation, and that's what you get for a player, hey, you can expect that. But if the idea that you're expecting an early second round pick that turned Fraser Minton, who was a early second round pick, a first round pick, and all that, and you're hyper focused on what Fraser Minton's doing this year based off of that, you're most likely going to be let down by the return. Like, you can go back to Vancouver with the Hughes return, and people are like, "Oh, it just feels wrong." If it doesn't feel enough, I'm like, it never was going to feel enough.
No.
In terms of what they had to deal with, they did pretty good. They still didn't win the trade because you're trading away Quinn Hughes, but they did pretty good. And then you look at the Kiefer Sherwood trade. There was talk that they were looking for a first round pick, and I always felt that was too much.
Yeah.
But getting 2 second round picks, that's fantastic. Like, depending on how San Jose does, that second round pick this year could still be top end of the second round pick. That pick could still be even closer to the Canucks than it should be, honestly, with how good Celebrini's playing. But yeah, and then they got another pick next year, right? So it's not a bad. Honestly, I would prefer. Honestly, I think I would prefer these 2 second round picks than just a late first round pick, because you know that if say it was San Jose that they made the trade, they, in this hypothetical, you know that they would have protected that first round pick from probably top 15. So you're looking at a late first round pick anyways, and the 9 times out of 10, the difference between a late first round pick versus a early second round pick is not much different. So getting a second kick at the can with that second round pick, that's pretty good.
Well, and then at some point here, I mean, further down the road, like, a lot of times, a lot of these first round picks, like, you look at, a lot of them are conditional picks depending on, like, as we go back to the Anderson trade, that 28 pick, that second round pick is a conditional first if the Vegas Golden Knights win the cup in 26. You'd rather have that. It's just, okay, let's just have it as a second round pick, and not, because, I mean, it's just a perception, I guess. Everybody, we had 3 first round picks because there's something kind of sexy about a first round pick. But really, as we go through an expansion, if we take this in actual contents, if we go to 34 teams, that's probably a player that you're going to have a second round grade on anyway. So you might as well just get a second round pick and just say, okay, that's what we got.
Well, it's just the difference between pick 20 and pick 45. Not much difference depending on the list. So
no, it's all dependent on style. I guess for the Vegas side, I guess it's going to come down to, it feels like it'll come down to Vegas, Edmonton, and I think Edmonton has to I still think Edmonton needs to figure out their goaltending if they're going to go anywhere, and they're kind of handcuffed in terms of cap space with Andrew Mangiapane. I mean, I think they want to trade Andrew Mangiapane. kind of the feel that I get out of Edmonton anyway. And Vegas is not done. They've got something out of their sleeve. So that will be fascinating as part of the trade deadline in a month.
Yep, and because we're gonna get a roster freeze for the Olympics, and then so I think we might see a flurry leading up into that, and then the actual trade deadline.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll leave it here. Next week, I think we're going to start digging into the Olympics here because it was the last week of Canucks hockey, last week of NHL hockey. I think we're kind of in the wrap up for the first half of the entire season, and what I'm kind of looking forward to talking about the Olympics. I think this will be a fascinating tournament. So we'll spend a good chunk of time on that next week. Meanwhile, how do we follow you and your yelling at Canucks meet Twitter?
I'm Brandon Canucks 03 on Twitter. Yeah.
Tyler, who will not yell on Twitter, TNOBLE. Chris is Schneid's, SCHNEIDZ. Devin, we hope to have around for the Olympics here. You can find him on Instagram at Devin Holmes Smith. By the way, just on a side note, Sean, I thought I was going to beat Devin in fantasy this week until last night. Then I lost. And then you can follow me. I mostly yell at Flames social media, but I will yell occasionally at Canucks social media too, KVOLE, on all social media platforms. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and also on the Hockey Podcast Network. Thanks, everyone, for watching. Thank you for listening. We will talk to you all very soon. Bye for now. Go Hawks.